Welcome to the Inspired Teacher's Guide podcast. We are Kim Wilkins and Laura Wooldridge, just two teachers trying to podcast. We are so glad that you've joined us.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome back. Happy days. We're back today with another special guest, to teach us about a topic that we've been learning about.
Yeah.
Before we get started, let's think about what we talked about last week. I wasn't with you, Laura.
I missed you really bad, Kim.
Thank you. Thank you.
So last week I just shared some simple resources that you can listen to. And when I was reflecting on it, I just was thinking how important it is that we keep on growing. No matter how many years or days we have in the classroom, it's so important to keep on growing.
It's true.
It's so true. At Williams, when I taught at the university level, our mission statement was that we will create teachers who are intentional, reflective, and growing. And I think that's so important to instill in our younger teachers, but also in our veteran teachers.
It is. And I think also we need to remember that it's not always comfortable. It's going to be uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Growth it's not an easy process, and discomfort, that's where the magic starts to happen. And so I think we have to lean into that.
Mm-hmm. And really think about, Renee's word, refraction, being reflective on what we're learning and then acting upon it.
Yes, I think so too. Well, since I didn't get to share mine because I was sick, I'll just tell you a couple that I love. I noticed when I started looking back through mine, Laura, that I have a lot of foodies, tons of recipes and cooking hacks, and designers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, lots of designers. I look at lots of really neat designers. But for inspiration, my favorite three, I think, are Brene Brown and Mel Robbins. I love her so much. She reminds me of my mom.
Oh.
She's so straight. She shoots it straight. And I think that's why I love her so much. She just doesn't pull any punches. And then I love Bob Goff.
Oh, yes.
If I could ever get to meet a human being in this world, I think that has remained steady and inspirational to me, it's Bob Goff. I know he won't ever listen to this. I've asked him to come on, but he hasn't accepted. He thinks I'm probably stalking him, but he is just, the things he's done and gone out on a limb to make a difference in the world are just great things. And I really like them. So those three people keep me thinking positively.
Mm-hmm. Listeners, Kim and I are really shooting for the stars. We're asking all kinds of people to come on the podcast, like Jeff Anderson and David Thomas and Bob Goff, and surely someday.
Someday. So I know Jeff Anderson's out there just wanting to talk to us. We are best friends at heart.
We are.
I need to send him that picture that I had taken with him where I said, "Hey, would you put your arm around me and pretend like we're friends?" And he did.
And remind him that I was the girl that he would stop and say, "Do not have this baby in my workshop."
Yes. Yeah.
Like 3 days out having a baby. And he'd be like, "Do not have the baby.
Do not do it."
I want to say one more thing about last time. So one more thing about last week is podcast. If you're not a podcast listener, you are because you're listening to this, but if you're not really branching out into podcasts, I highly encourage you to do that, because you can listen to them in the car. You can listen to them while you're doing laundry or dishes. And there's just so many out there that can help you become a better teacher in all areas. Like a lot of the ones I shared aren't necessarily content teaching, but it's that SEL, that whole teacher kind of thing. But one content and pedagogy podcast that I did not mention is the 10-minute teacher podcast. Those are just short, quick little episodes that you can listen to. And so I thought I would add that on there before we get started.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so let's move on to today's episode. It's another one that we have about the practice of co-teaching. Mm-hmm. We want to better learn how to use co-teaching to support our students with learning differences.
All right, and to help us further learn about this topic, we have a guest. My drum roll's not working. Okay, so I'll just do a drum roll for you. Listeners, our sound is not working, and I don't know why. That's why you didn't have intro music. So we're about to do our guest, and you are going to get Laura's drum roll to introduce this guest. So to help us learn about co-teaching, to help us learn more about it, we have a guest. Our guest is Debbie Fleming. Welcome.
Yes, we have
Yes,
Debbie. Debbie, we're so glad you're with us. She was working in our school today, Laura, with our teachers in co-teaching, and she agreed to sit down and have a little chat with us.
Oh, I'm so thankful. Listeners, you're going to love her.
Yes.
I got to talk to Debbie to invite her on the podcast, and we ended up talking for about an hour, just having fun together. So I think you'll enjoy it. Hey, Debbie, why don't you share a little bit of your background and your experience with our listeners so they get to know you?
Okay, that's perfect. Well, first of all, let me say thank you to both of you. This is indeed a treat for me, a first for me. I'll have to admit, I've been very nervous all day about it, but I appreciate so much. Number one, you inviting me, and number two, trying to make sure that people do know about co-teaching. So I'm old. I've been around for a long time. I said, I could have retired several years ago, but I started out as a kindergarten teacher and taught kindergarten for quite a few years. And then I moved up to high school and was a family and consumer science teacher and taught there for several years. Ended up in fourth grade. I've taught most of the classes, most of the grades between kindergarten and 12th grade. Ended up in fourth grade, and from fourth grade became a literacy specialist for South Central Co-op in South Arkansas. Was a literacy specialist there for several years, and then moved to the State Department. Moving to the State Department, I was the State Literacy and Math Coordinator for SPDIG, State Personnel Development Grant, where I spent about 6, 7, 8 years there, and then moved into co-teaching. I would go with the director of the co-teaching project when she would do trainings, and she would model station teaching. I was one of the stations. And so I would either talk about literacy or math, and fell in love with co-teaching. And so when the opportunity was presented to me to join the co-teaching project, I did. And so I became a specialist with the Arkansas Co-Teaching Project, stayed there for several years until the director retired, and I'm now the director of the Arkansas Co-Teaching Project.
Well, that's
Man,
exciting.
you've got experience.
You do. You've done it all, girl.
Well, been around, like I said, been around for a long time.
Oh, yes. We've been around the block a couple of times too. Okay, so Debbie, let's talk about co-teaching. How would you best explain co-teaching first to teachers and then to parents and stakeholders? So it's your first meeting with a group of teachers. How do you lay that out?
That's a very good question. Number one, people think co-teaching, it's just two people. You put two people in the classroom and they co-teach. But it's so much more than that, because we are talking about students who learn differently and being able to give them what they need along with their peers. So co-teaching is normally a general education teacher and a special education teacher teaching together in a general education classroom with a general education curriculum, offering that curriculum, grade level curriculum, to all students. We have students, gifted and talented students, we have ELL students, and we have students, as you said, who learn differently. And so those two teachers both teach all students. So the special educator is teaching all students in the classroom, and the general education teacher is teaching all students in the classroom. So it's more than just two teachers in a classroom. It's both of them joining together and teaching all students. To a parent or a stakeholder, I would carry that a little bit more or forward to be able to say that it's more than academics in a co-taught classroom. As you said, the social emotional learning, it's allowing those students with disabilities or who learn differently, it's allowing them to have peer models. Often when they have been segregated and sent far away, it used to be in the middle building behind the main building.
Yes.
When they have the opportunity to be involved with their peers, we see things like high school students, as we say, our high school students being invited to sit with their peers at a pep rally. Something that broke my heart, but it made me feel so good too, is we had a parent of about a second or third grader. And she said for the first time, her son was being invited to birthday parties.
Oh,
I know, because, when they had been segregated, when they've been isolated down the hall or whatever in a
Oh my
room,
goodness.
then they didn't know the other kids in their class. And so there's so much, as I said, social emotional learning that goes on, as well as academic. So it's good. And, there's also a benefit for those students without disabilities.
Yes.
Because, it teaches them compassion. It allows them to see students who maybe learn differently or who act differently. And so, it's good for all students. And of course, it's a blessing for those co-teachers.
Yeah,
that's beautiful.
it is. It is.
Yeah. So what is the most important thing, Debbie, you think that we should understand? If it rising to the top, the most important thing that we should understand about a co-taught classroom?
Well, I think one of the things that is most important is that the students see both of the co-teachers as their teacher. They don't see the general education teacher being their teacher and the special education co-teacher coming in to help those students who learn differently.
Right.
They are both co-teachers, equal parity. And part of the definition of co-teaching is that they are two licensed professionals, and they are equal. That special educator went to college just to learn something different than the general education did. We say the general education co-teacher is the content expert, and the special educator is the strategies expert. So they both have college degrees. They're just in different areas. So the most important thing, I think, is for the students to see them as equal and for those co-teachers to feel equal.
Yeah.
A lot of times we have, I don't want to say issues, but I'm going to say issues with the general education co-teacher going into that general education classroom and feeling like an aide, feeling like just an assistant. What can I do to help you, not help the kids and the students? And so it's important not only for the students to be able to see both co-teachers as their teacher, but that both of the co-teachers actually do feel like they're both the teachers. There's parity there.
Yeah.
And then it's important for the parents to see that they're both co-teachers. So when a note is sent home from the teachers to the parents, that is signed by both of the co-teachers. That when a call needs to be made from home, that they go into the lounge, they sit down, they turn the speaker on, and they make that phone call together. It's not, the special education co-teacher calls the parents of those students who do learn differently, and the general education teacher gets to make all the other phone calls. It's that they do that together, that everyone sees them as a partnership. We call it a co-teaching partnership. And so it's important that everybody, all of the stakeholders, the parents, the administrator, everybody in the school, as well as the students, see them as a partnership working together for the good of all the students in the class.
This is something that just came to my mind when you were talking is I've worked in a school before where co-teaching was activated and the special ed teacher did not enter the picture until like the second week of school. And administrators, if you're listening, they need to be in there from second one, because then it's already establishing in the student's mind that this person is, additional or something like that, and not the teacher.
That's an excellent point, and one of the things that we do or that we ask our co-teachers to do is a lot of it is about a relationship that is formed between those two co-teachers. And so we stress to the co-teachers on the first day of school, you go and you stand in front of the students together and you introduce yourself as we are your teachers. And it's not my classroom and your classroom. It's not my students and your students. It's our classroom. It's our students. And we're both going to be your teachers this year. We don't want them to see any difference between one and the other.
How do administrators then and school leaders support these co-teachers in this journey, I guess?
Absolutely. If you're going to have successful co-teaching, you have to have an administrator who's behind you. An administrator who believes in co-teaching and will do what's necessary to make sure it's successful. And so to be successful, one of the main things, and I think we'll probably talk about this in a minute, but one of the main things is allowing those two co-teachers to have time to plan together. One of the things that we say is if a general education co-teacher does all the planning and the special educator has no idea of what's going on in that classroom, the special educator walks in when it's time to start the class and says, "What do you want me to do?"
Mm-hmm.
And the general educator often, if has not had that full support from the administrator, will say, "I don't know, just go sit with Johnny, or can you go run these papers off, or something like that." Yeah,
just an assistant.
But when they plan together, that special educator doesn't have to ask when they walk in the door, "What do you want me to do today?" Because they plan together, and that special educator knows exactly what his or her role is, what the responsibilities will be, and if there's anything needed, they bring that with them.
Mm-hmm.
And that classroom then becomes the, again, when the co-teachers are teaching together, it's their classroom. And so that special educator, when he or she comes in, everything's already there for them. They have a place in that classroom. And it's important that they have a place, because if the students see that they have a place in that classroom, that they belong in that classroom, that both names are outside the door. So when they come in, they see both names outside the door, then they know it is a co-taught classroom and they have two teachers. And it's easy just to explain it that way.
Yeah.
It's a class with two teachers. There's really no reason to know that one's a special educator, one's a general educator. Mm-hmm. It's just two teachers teaching a group of students with diverse needs.
We are your teachers.
That's right. They're my teachers. Mm-hmm. How long typically is the special education teacher in the classroom with the gen ed teacher?
Yeah, and so we go to law and what's best for the students. Yeah. So, of course, the law says that they're there, that the special educator is there the length of time that he or she is supposed to provide services according to the IEP.
Gotcha.
And so if the IEP says that, the special educator should be in that co-taught class for 30 minutes a day, that's what meets the law.
Okay.
We say best practice is that special educator can be in there for that entire class period. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we say is if the class period is a 45-minute class period and the special educator is in there for 30 minutes, what happens to the 15 minutes when he or she leaves?
That's exactly right.
And so, again, the law is that they're there for the time that the IEP designates. But we say best practice would be if they could stay in there for the entire class period. And we know sometimes that is not possible. Smaller schools especially, it's not possible. And they have to jump in and jump out. Yeah. So through creative planning, a lot of times administrators can make it happen.
I'm just doing so much thinking because I'm in schools that are smaller and bigger and kind of spread out. And I see co-teaching, just like all initiatives coming through or learning practices coming through at different phases of implementation. So listeners, I just want to encourage you, if you are implementing inclusion with co-teaching and you're thinking, oh, this is not the way we're doing it, this is coming out in December. You can do an amazing reset in January.
Absolutely.
And start this process, put both of those names out and kind of start doing this. But you need to really be putting some ideas in your pocket for August of next year. Absolutely. You have a new batch of students, and Kim and I always say, they don't know what you did last year. So it's
they don't have a clue.
So, you can, no matter what, you need to implement now, you're learning, but really be thinking about how can you make co-teaching even better next year.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I'm thinking about the planning time. Mm-hmm. So how do you get that started and what would that look like?
Okay. So, of course, the best scenario would be that the two co-teachers could plan together every day. But that's not going to happen. I mean, schedules, I always say that the hardest job a principal has is creating schedules. And it would be nice. It would be nice if the co-teaching partnership could have a common planning time. but it's
I
hard.
want to tell you a funny story, Debbie. So
Okay.
Kim and I worked a little elementary school together, and the principal was like, "Can you help me with the master schedule?" And I'm sure. I take it home, I get it all done. It's maybe sixth grades are in the building, and I'm like, "This was so much easier than I thought." And I realized half the sixth graders didn't have lunch.
Yeah.
And when I gave all the sixth graders lunch, it totally messed it up. So I'm like,
Right.
oh,
Right.
bless these master schedule
right.
people.
It is. It's the hardest job they
Hard.
have, and I say that in front of administrators, and they'll shake their head.
It is.
And they're trying to please all of their staff, and they can't. This one wants her planning period to be first thing in the morning. This one wants hers to be last in the afternoon. This one wants it combined with her lunch, and you just can't do that when you have a big staff.
It's really hard. I've done master schedules, and you have to make sure that there's common planning time, and there's chunks of instructional time, and then they have to have all their pull-out classes, and they have to eat lunch, or else they go home hungry.
They go tell their mom, "I didn't get to eat
I
today.
didn't eat today. They don't let me eat on
Sorry,
Thursdays.
here I don't get to eat lunch.
I love it though. To me, it's like a puzzle,
It is a
Oh,
puzzle.
and I love doing it. I mean,
I always do it on a spreadsheet. Always do it out on a spreadsheet.
And when you start talking about your students who learn differently, and I'm so glad you said it that way. We do not say special education students.
No,
We do say students with disabilities, but students who learn differently is a more appropriate way to say it. But it's a lot of times when you start pulling in, we ask you to schedule your students who learn differently first.
yes,
And then fill in. So a lot of times we'll use Post-it notes, and we'll put the names on the Post-it notes and their needs. And then, we maneuver those Post-it notes around, and then it's easy to put the others in. We have one school that does that part manually, and then they let a program come in and fill in with the rest of it.
That's good.
Yeah.
Then you make sure you're meeting the needs of the children who have the most needs.
That's right. That's right. And they need, when you, and again, there's no rule or regulation about how many students with disabilities or who learn differently can be in a co-taught class. We say best practice is no more than a third. Okay. So when you think of a class of 18, then no more than 6 should be a student who learns differently. And that could include ELL, that could include, behavior issues, those that are on behavioral plans. So you just have to think of all of those into one.
Okay.
But I want to go back and answer your question about the planning. How do you do it? So again, it would be nice to have it every day, but in the world that we live in now, we have PLCs, we have so many things that teachers are pulled out for. So what we ask for is one time a week, one class period a week. The co-teachers have the ability to plan face-to-face.
Okay.
And then what we suggest is to have an online document, a shared online Google document, whatever, OneDrive, whatever, a shared document. And because the general educator is the content expert, he or she holds the curriculum guide, knows the standards. He or she then would decide what was going to be taught that week.
Okay.
And we have a document that we share with our co-teachers, but it's where they put like what standard they'll be covering, kind of what the theme of the lesson will be, and maybe resources. Maybe go ahead and put page numbers in a math book or some kind of resource that they're going to be using, a video that they know is appropriate for what they're going to be teaching each day of the week. And then anytime they want to, this is not where you sit down and have to do this like an hour. You're going to do this for an hour. And then, tomorrow you're going to do it for another hour in the afternoon. It's just whenever the thought comes to you. So the gen ed teacher starts that. Then the special educator can come in at any point and see what's being taught. The special educator is the one who puts in the accommodations that must be met.
Oh, that's good.
Those specially designed instructional strategies that must be met, because that's that person's expertise. So based on what you're going to be teaching that week, the accommodations that would apply to what's being taught.
Gotcha.
Let's say if there's a reading disability and you're not reading, then that accommodation doesn't need to be listed. So it's the accommodations that need to be listed based on what
for that particular lesson.
Exactly. So if a special educator is also letting the general educator know, exactly what needs to be done in the classroom for those students that do learn differently. And then when they have that time to come together, that one time a week, then they decide how they're going to do the lesson. We have 6 instructional formats, what format they will use. How will they assess the students to see if they got what they were supposed to get, formatively assess them? What kind of strategies will they use? So they plan all of that together. And so if you do all of the pre-planning on a shared document, when you come together for that hour, it just falls into place, and you can plan a whole week and maybe even 2 or 3 weeks.
Right.
Because if you have it truly
Kind of
planned,
mapped out.
absolutely, it just falls into place. And sometimes the lesson will determine what format you're going to use, and you don't even have to talk about that one.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes it so much easier, and it's planned. And
Yeah.
it's co-planned. It's both of those teachers using their expertise to plan the lesson that will best meet the needs for every student in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you mentioned 6
instructional
formats. Why don't you speak about that?
So we use the formats that were first used by Dr. Marilyn Friend and years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's nothing better. Well, there is one better. I'm going to have a conversation with Dr. Marilyn Friend one day. So the first one is one teach, one assist. And that's where one of the co-teachers is instructing the students. The other is circulating around the room, assisting students as needed. Now, that role has to change. It has to change often.
Yeah.
There is nothing said. A special educator can present content. I watched the class today, and I mean, if you walked in, you would not know which one was the general educator.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
and that's at my school.
That's at your school, and that's what we want.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the students and for anyone walking in, that again, it's just their 2 teachers. So one is instructing and one is assisting, switching those roles often. The second one is one teach, one observe. And it's where you're collecting data or data, however you want to say it. I say data. It's collecting data. So one is instructing and the other is collecting data. It could be engagement. It's whatever you need to collect data on. If you're getting ready for an RTI meeting, it's collecting data for that. If it's an IEP meeting, you're collecting data for that. And what data you're collecting will drive who's doing the collection.
So there's a purpose in that.
There is a definite purpose.
The purpose is to plan future lessons.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And it's going to be something, it's short. It's not all period. It's, let's say if you do want to look at student engagement, if you realize you're losing students and you want to see where you're losing them, you might do a 2-minute at the beginning of the class period, in the middle of the classroom, in the middle of class period, take another, really quick little data collection, and then maybe at the end and say where you're missing, where you're losing them, what's happening when you lose them. The important thing is if you're going to collect it, do something with it.
Okay.
Don't just collect it and put it on a shelf.
Yes.
So the next one is, and again, those roles change often too.
Okay.
Even within a class period, you could do one teach, one assist, and it could flip flop, right?
Oh, you can do probably all 6 in one class period.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Most of the class periods will start with one teach, one assist, just because of the nature of what you do. You're checking roll, you're doing whatever. So one is primarily talking with the students, getting that done, while the other maybe is doing some like checking roll, lunch count, that kind of thing. So the third one is parallel. And parallel is where you have a division of the class. And we say as close to an equal division of the class. So one of the co-teachers takes half of the class, the other one takes the other half of the class. And you're teaching the same lesson to the same level of understanding. It might be done in a little bit different way. It might be, my co-teaching partner is auditory, I'm visual. So maybe if I'm teaching, I choose to teach the students who have who learn visually, and she may be teaching those that learn auditorily. So you're teaching the same lesson, but it might be in a little bit different way.
Okay.
To the same level of understanding. And so when you come back together as a group, you have the same understanding of what was taught in that parallel group. Students we always say, face the students away from each other and the co-teachers toward each other so that they can see, they can give signals if they need to, but yet the 2 sections of the students, they're not facing each other, so they're not playing with each other and doing whatever.
And this
You have a
is not
question?
students with special needs on this side and
Oh,
Jenny
no, ma'am.
Yes.
No, ma'am.
Yes.
a
No,
mixed
ma'am.
group on
It
both.
is, yeah, it is never, ever isolating the students with disabilities or learn differently from those who don't.
Okay, gotcha.
So, yeah, it would be a blend. I mean, it depends. You could just say, okay, let's divide the class in half. Here, this half,
Mhm.
you go, you go here. This half, you go here. So it could be that. It could be 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. It could
Okay.
be whatever, however you want to do it. But if you are doing it based on data, then you will do it, ahead of time, and you'll
Mhm.
know exactly who's going with what group.
Great.
Okay. So
But
that's
now,
parallel.
that's parallel. And in that, both of the co-teachers have to be comfortable with content.
Mhm.
Oh,
So
that's important.
sometimes your special educator does not feel as comfortable with the content. So it has to be that format has to be used when they feel comfortable with content.
Yeah.
Fourth one is station teaching.
Okay.
I saw it twice today.
You did?
I did. It
What
was great.
grades?
It was third grade.
Okay.
Third grade. Both of them were in third grade. So station teaching is where there is a rotation. You have different stations, and in parallel, you're teaching the same content. In stations, you're teaching different content around a central theme, but still different content, all having the same, again, the same thing, but in each of the stations, something different is happening.
Gotcha.
And it has to be almost like a standalone station because you're going to have students starting in each of the stations.
Mhm.
We normally think of each teacher leading a station and then having an independent station. It doesn't have to be. It can be just 2 stations. It
Mhm.
can be 6 stations, whatever the teachers feel they can handle. I always say, if you want to see good co-teaching, go to a kindergarten. I mean, good station teaching, go to a
Yes.
kindergarten classroom, because kindergarten teachers can teach those 5-year-olds how to move through a lot of stations.
They can.
Mhm.
So that's that one. We use timers. We say the most important thing is teaching the students the routine,
Yeah.
how to move.
What do we say, Laura? Routines and procedures.
That's exactly right.
I mean, if
Yeah,
that's not down,
that's right.
none
That's
of that
right.
works. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They have to know that when that timer goes off, they wait for a cue. Some say stand up and wait for the teacher to send you, and the teacher will say station rotation, please, or a countdown: 1, do this; 2, do this; 3, move. And so they're all moving at the same time in the same direction, so that there's no chaos. It's very structured. That was the fourth. The fifth
Yes.
is team teaching. Team teaching is my favorite.
Okay.
And the reason it's my favorite is both of the co-teachers are involved in the instruction at the same time. So one may be explaining it while another one is demonstrating it.
Oh, that's good.
The ways I love it because it's using more than one modality.
Mm-hmm.
So auditory learners can listen to the one talking. Visual learners can watch the one who's demonstrating it.
That's good.
It can be like a math problem, and one teacher is telling about it, explaining it, while the other is maybe on an Elmo,
Yeah.
either writing it out or
Manipulatives
demonstrating
or
it.
something.
Yeah, with manipulatives,
Mhm.
filling out if it's let's say literacy, where that's not, you're not using manipulatives.
Right.
Maybe it's using a Venn diagram.
Okay.
And so one is using that Venn diagram while the other one explains and talks about how they're alike and how they're different.
Mhm.
Again, with this one, you got to make sure that the teachers are comfortable with the content.
Mhm.
We always say this one takes the most planning and the most trust, because you are both teaching basically the lesson.
Mhm.
You're just teaching it in 2 different ways.
Mhm.
Okay.
So the 6th one is alternative teaching. And so alternative is where you pull a small group of students for a very short period of time, in a very small group of students, 3 or 4, for maybe 6, 8 minutes. And again, we love it when it's based on data, that you did something yesterday, you had a formative assessment, and you realized these 3 students did not get it. So you can pull those 3 students and into an alternative group, and you can do a little bit of a reteach.
Okay.
Maybe just clearing up some misconceptions.
Mhm.
It could be right the opposite. You realize that the majority of the students did not get it, but these 4 did. So why should they have to sit through another explanation of it?
Mhm.
So they're pulled, and we do an extension. Sometimes we need to reteach. So this in a little bit of this today, where they talked about the vocabulary that they were going to be reading about.
Oh.
So it might be, if you know that some students are going to struggle with vocabulary, you do an alternative group, you pull them and you go over that vocabulary prior to the lesson, so that when they get in the group with the lesson, they already know what it means. So that's alternative. So we say it's either to pre-teach, reteach, or extend. And once again, we have to change those roles. And either of those co-teachers are capable. The special educator, my special education partner, always says, I can extend. I'm a special education teacher, but I can extend. And so once again, we do not want one teacher to be identified as the person who always pulls the group. And Laura, I can see you already thinking, it's never, ever, ever just students who learn differently.
Yes.
When you pull an alternative group, you don't want those students to always say, oh, it's going to be me. It might be, again, based on data, which we would love for it to be based on data. And, if you see that it's just students who learn differently, just include another one or two that maybe struggle, who could benefit from it. Now, I want to go back to team teaching, because what we always hear is team teaching is when the two co-teachers just go back and forth. I present, and then Kim steps in and she presents a little bit, and I present a little bit. We just go back and forth. That we call team teaching. I like the idea of people knowing that team teaching is both teachers teaching maybe in different ways. So I'm going to suggest to Dr. Marilyn Friend, when I have the opportunity, we want to add a seventh. We want to add a seventh for instructional format. It's going to be collaborative teaching. Yeah, I want to name it collaborative teaching. And that's where you are just, kind of throwing it back and forth to each other.
Laura and I do that all the time.
Well, then you're using a collaborative format.
We do.
So, of course, I'm not sure that she's going to take all of her years of research and change just because I think so.
Oh, I bet she would appreciate your boots on the ground approach.
As you've been describing these models, I've been thinking about when Kim and I do workshops together, we do flow through.
Absolutely. And a lot of times co-teachers will do it and not even realize that they're doing that format. And now we have a name. We give them a name for what they're doing.
Like, oh, I did that. That's what we do. Yeah. So it sounds like you go in lots of schools, lots of times.
A lot of schools.
A lot of schools. Tell us about some of the great successes you've seen with co-teaching.
I think I mentioned the one about the behavioral. I mean, the social emotional. When you have a parent who says, "My child is
huge,
is getting invited to a birthday party or getting invited to a dance," went to one where it was homecoming, and on the homecoming court, there were two students.
Oh,
yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, two students with disabilities or who learn differently. Yeah. And that's full acceptance. That's when you know you have an inclusive environment. And actually in that school, the students were the ones who voted.
Oh,
wonderful.
And so, when you see that there's no more division between students, that it is inclusive. We always talk about, we know what it feels like to be excluded. We've all been excluded from something in our lifetime. But when it's your life, when it's for a parent, it's their child's life. We often say, consider those students, every student in your classroom. If it were your student, what would you want? If it were your child, what would you want? Or your grandchild, what would you want? And that's what we as teachers need to do. So the biggest thing, I think, is the acceptance. And then being able to see a student with disability. In a co-taught class, we do not water things down. For those students who learn differently, they get the same content presented the same way. Now, they have accommodations. So,
but they have access.
They have access. That's exactly right. And when you see these students who have been isolated, who are getting this content and they're succeeding with it, when you put the expectations high, a lot of times you're going to be really surprised at what the students will do for you.
Yes.
They'll meet those expectations. And so a student who has never had the opportunity to experience success on that level, to be able to finally be able to.
You're speaking to my heart right now. I'm a dyslexia therapist. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That is my heart. I'm also the mother of two children and 3 grandsons who have learning disabilities and are dyslexic, dysgraphic, dyscalculia, all the things. And so, knowing how frustrating that is for them and getting to think about being in a classroom where they feel that success is for a mama heart, that's a big deal.
And for you how to help your student, your children and your grandchildren.
Right.
But for a parent who does not,
I know,
and has to rely on the school and has to trust the school
with their most prized possession.
Absolutely. They give you their most prized possession and they say, please give me a productive citizen.
That's right.
And so when they have the opportunity to have those peers who they can model their behavior after those peers, get to see what it's like. I mean, again, we don't, when you get out into the world,
Exactly what
there is no, as my co-teaching partner says, there's no resource line in Walmart. Everybody goes through the same line. So, we just have to remember that, God made those students just a little bit different. And
I had a superintendent one time who used to say, Dr. Braden, his name was Dr. Braden. He passed away a few years ago. He used to say, they're sending us the best they've got.
That's exactly.
They're not keeping the good ones at home.
That's right.
That's
right.
They're sending us their best. And we're going to do the best we can do when we've got them.
That's right.
Kim has said that to a bunch of schools. I've listened to it.
Yeah.
All right, Debbie, tell us, as you're observing and working with teachers and training them, what struggles are the most common with co-teaching?
The most common is not having planning time.
Yeah.
That is the one that we hear over and over and over again. And their hands are kind of tied.
Yeah.
We'll hear the co-teachers say, well, we try to get together every Saturday morning.
God bless them.
Because we never have time. We stay after school. We come in early in the morning just to try to get that time. If they don't have that planning time, again, they're not going to be successful because they're not going to know what's going on, and you can't go in at the last minute and feel like you have your resources that you need. But if I'm going to teach a lesson, let's say I'm a special educator and I'm going to teach a lesson, and my general educator, Kim, has said, okay, I'd like for you to teach this. Let's plan for you to teach this. But I don't even know what's needed. How can I come into the classroom prepared? And then probably the second biggest thing is not having administrative support. That's probably the biggest. And we see our biggest successes when it's a team. And we do a year-long professional development that we do in partnership with Johns Hopkins University. And we know the research that they do. And we bring them together before school starts. And one of the things that's a non-negotiable for Johns Hopkins is the administrator has to come with that co-teaching partnership.
Well, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
We
really want that administrator here, everything that the co-teachers here to know exactly. And we always talk about the expectations for both. The expectations for the co-teachers and the expectations for the administrators.
Well, buy-in is so important for any initiative that you want to implement in a school. If you don't have buy-in from everybody, then you're just setting yourself up for failure and wasting time and valuable resources. So
and the life of kids.
Yeah. So I've heard you say planning, administrative buy-in. Each teacher is a part of that classroom. That is their classroom. It's not her classroom. She's coming in to help, or he. Those are three things that I hear you say are tips. Do you have any others?
Relationship. I'm going to say that without a relationship, you're going to struggle. You don't have to be best friends. I've seen partnerships where I go in to observe and I think, oh my goodness, they work so well together. And then we find out they can't stand each other. We had, I tell this story and I tell him that I tell the story. It was a new partnership and it was a man and a woman and young, a young man and a young woman. And he took her out to lunch and he said, I don't want to talk anything school. I want to talk about you and I want to be able to talk about me to you. And so he said, where did you go to college? Were you in a sorority? Tell me how did you do? What class did you take that you absolutely hated? What class did you absolutely love? How did you meet your husband? Tell me about getting pregnant with your first student, your first child. Was it easy to get pregnant? Was it a struggle? And
like wanted to be
you
your
get
friend.
to know everything about them. And again, you don't have to be best friends. You don't have to go out and eat together. You don't have to be socially, best friends or even friends. But getting to know each other and getting to know the little quirks that you have.
Yeah.
When I like it hot, you like it cold. Well, we need to come to an agreement on somewhere in the middle. We always say, pick your battles.
Yeah.
What's important to you. If it's really important to you, you need to let your co-teacher know it's really important. When I stop by Sonic and I get my lemon slush, I want to get my co-teaching partner, Debbie Byers. I want to get her a Diet Coke because that's what she drinks. So it's knowing things like that and having that relationship before you ever walk into the classroom, knowing who's going to be responsible for what, having that time to talk and plan before you ever walk in that classroom.
And then I think remembering to work on your relationship all throughout the year to continue to develop that is very
Absolutely.
important too.
Yeah.
It's bad when it's not a good relationship. It's a struggle. They don't want to be in the same classroom together. The kids see it. I mean, it's, students can pick up on it.
Oh, they do. They don't miss anything.
You're right.
And those kindergartners are maybe the smartest.
Yes. They go home and tell their parents. I used to say when I taught kindergarten, I will believe half of what your child comes and tells me about you if you will believe half of what they go home and tell you about me.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Every time I see this grown man in town, I think, oh, what he said about his parents when I was in my internship. I still think about it every time I see him.
I know.
Okay, Debbie, this is just on my heart because listeners, if you're not from Arkansas, just know that this is something that has become a mandate in Arkansas classrooms, and teachers are at all levels of implementation. So what tips and encouragement can you tell to listeners who are realizing that maybe they're not really implementing co-teaching, but they're supposed to be? What advice and tips do you have for them?
And resources.
So number one, call me.
Call
email me. So that's my job, is to help co-teachers co-teach effectively. Start out small. We always tell administrators when they say, okay, we want to go all in. We don't want resource classes. We believe in the continuum. We believe in the full continuum. And then start small. Maybe start with, let's say that you're, I'll just use this one, a 3-6 building. Start out maybe with a 4th grade, if you've never co-taught before. Start out with the 4th grade literacy and maybe a 5th grade math. I mean, start small and learn how to co-teach, and then become a classroom that others can come and watch.
Yeah.
And so then slowly implement it till you have full implementation. And not every class is going to be co-taught. So, we have people who say, administrators who say, okay, I have this really good co-teaching partnership. Should I now put the gen ed co-teacher with another special ed and put the special ed with another gen ed? And we say, no, do not do that. Leave that strong partnership together and let them be the resource for those new co-teachers. Let them be able to go in and see what good co-teaching looks like. We are on a mission. We have a website, arcoteaching.com, and we are on a mission this year to get more videos. Because the videos that we have of the 6 instructional formats on our website are 3rd and 4th grade classrooms.
Okay.
And they're old. We know that. And so we've bought some really good recording equipment. And that's our mission this year, is to record
That's great.
kindergarten through 12th grade.
Because teachers need to see it.
Absolutely.
They need
And
to
that's
see what
they
that
say.
should look like. Yeah.
And so
I do.
yeah,
As a teacher.
So we have a lot of resources on our website, and
we'll put that in the notes,
Okay.
arcoteaching.com.
absolutely. And and feel free to share my email address. I
Okay.
would love for
We
them
will do that, yeah.
I had two messages today for schools that are asking us to come in.
What if it's in Kentucky?
If it's in Kentucky,
Maybe you can
you have to take a personal day. And you have to pay me to come. You have to pay my flight and things. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I've
that'd
been
be
told, yeah,
awesome.
it would be, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to be speaking at the National CEC conference
That's
with Johns
great.
Hopkins in March.
So this is your girl.
So yeah, call me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or don't call. Well, yeah, you can
Call me, call her, email,
Yeah,
get in touch with her.
yeah. Email me. I mean, my information's
She's
on my
got
signature line.
lots
So
of experience. Yeah. That's
Oh, Debbie,
awesome.
this has been great.
It has.
You know, I think for both of you, it's very important to me that co-teaching be done right.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Because when it's not done right, what happens is a teacher will say, well, we tried co-teaching and it didn't work.
Right.
It didn't work. Can't do it.
Or a parent will say, oh, no, my child was in a co-taught classroom. It was not good.
Yes.
And so it's very important to me and to the Arkansas Co-Teaching Project that co-teaching is done right.
So professional development.
Yes.
Support.
So we do professional development in the summers in the co-ops. We do any co-op that'll let us come. We normally are in most of the co-ops.
And you said it's a 1-year commitment.
Well, no, that's the Johns Hopkins.
That's the Johns Hopkins.
That's
Okay.
different. Yeah. And that's a big thing.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. So, but for any school, I mean, literally you can make one call me. I mean, literally email me today and she said, I need you. And she's a special education supervisor for 2 schools.
Okay.
And so she said, can we get you to come and do a training? So we do a 3-day training, a 3-hour training. We do a 6-hour training. I have a partner. We mimic what we ask our co-teachers to do. So I'm the gen ed side of our partnership and my special education co-teacher is not able to be with us, but yeah. So we present together. And, so we have like I said, a 3-hour presentation. Then we have a 6-hour presentation. And if they don't like for us to come, travel expenses and everything for small groups. But if you have a big enough group, we're going into schools and the administrators give us a day and we go in and train their co-teachers. Now, one of the neat things we did here at this school is we did a couple during the summer and then came back in the fall for the ones that were not here. So I think we pretty much have trained a big majority of the teachers.
They said we have to get the Debbies.
So
we got the Debbies. We wanted the Debbies.
So, yeah. And then again, like today, and we do this too. They'll invite us to come in the classroom and say, we just come in and sit and observe.
Yeah.
And just, work with our teachers, tell them, ways we are not evaluative in any way. We will never come in and tell you what you're doing is wrong.
Lauren, I don't either.
Or this is the way that you're supposed to do it. We will come in with suggestions. We will say, how could you make this lesson a parallel lesson?
Yeah.
How could you make this? Stations is the most effective. Parallel is the second most effective.
Okay.
And it's because we reduce that. We lower the student teacher ratio.
Okay. That makes sense.
And so, yeah. So those are the most effective and sometimes the hardest for co-teachers to learn to do. Yeah. So, it thrilled my heart when the 3rd grade teachers, I'm like, you're station teaching.
That's
and they're
great.
like,
yeah, we have some great teachers over here.
You do.
Yeah,
you really do. I've seen some great things today.
Very, very fortunate.
Yeah. Well, listeners, I encourage you, if you've not listened to our other episode about co-teaching with Jade, 2nd grade?
McDaniel.
And so she, Debbie is giving this huge overview of it, and Jade can give you a teacher who is actively co-teaching. She can give you that perspective. So, when we talked to Jade, we were like, we have to talk to Debbie.
Well, I'm so glad that you reached out to me because I thoroughly enjoyed this.
We're tickled. And how great is it worked out you were going to be here?
I know. That was great.
That was fantastic. So, well, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, we're so glad.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, listeners, we're glad you could join us today. Please be sure to share our podcast with other people. We know this is a topic that you're interested in, and we're all working to implement it, and we're eager to learn more. And Debbie has helped us so much today.
Yeah. And listeners, this is just a reminder that this is our last episode for 2024. So it's been a fun and learning experience, and a learning experience for Kim, because we are literally 2 teachers trying to podcast.
Yes.
So thanks for sticking with us in 2023. This is, I think, 25 episodes. So
it is. That's exciting.
But we appreciate you for listening, and we really want you to share this, share the podcast and this episode specifically with others and administrators, and just getting the word out about how powerful co-teaching can be, not only for your students, but for you as a professional.
Absolutely.
We're looking forward to 2024, and we have lots of great content headed your way. ADHD, positions of behavior, and tons of other things. So get ready, friends. All right, happy holidays, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.